buff, and he'll make some history of his own when he's sworn in next Wednesday as our next governor. We appreciate you making time for us, and I think you do have some time for questions, and we'll let you go ahead and pick who you want to hear from. But thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks so much, everybody. And first, I think the governor's left the building, but you know, I've had a chance to work with the governor for 12 years, pretty closely, as you might imagine, and you know, I'll have a chance to talk more about him publicly later on, but just really appreciate him and Trudy. And they've been, you know, just so you know, super gracious with the transition. Rob McKenna was super gracious with the transition to me as Attorney General. That benefited me and my team tremendously, and that's something that the Governor Inslee's provided to me and my team as well, and hopefully we're providing for Nick Brown. John Stang, now I know what would John do is my first question, I guess, when grappling with policy issues, so looking forward to that and looking forward to your questions. I'll be super brief to get started. You know, today's actually the last day my transition team is meeting today. We'll be meeting over the Lieutenant Governor's office here and just right when I walk out of this conversation. So the team's been working really hard over the transition time, as you might imagine, making decisions on agency leadership, as you might imagine. But one thing we're announcing today that you'll be seeing probably shortly on your phone is announcing today some budget priorities for the state of Washington. So I'll be really clear. Obviously, I'm not proposing a budget, right? That's not something I'm doing. But we have put together a document that outlines, in some respects, some fairly detailed proposals on the budget saving side, but also what I think are good investments for us as a state. So you were obviously facing a very significant budget shortfall. And, you know, my approach is been very focused since getting elected on making sure that we are scrubbing our budget in detail to find efficiencies and savings that will help address that budget shortfall. So in the document that you're going to see here shortly, I'm proposing a 6% cut across state agencies. I want to be clear, some agencies will have to take more, some will take a little bit less, but basically the equivalent of 6% is what we're going to have. We exclude from that K through 12 education. We exclude from that public safety, but we're going to have those cuts across the board with those exceptions. I think people expect that, you know, when you're facing a budget shortfall. It's no different than a family budget. You've got to make your priorities. You've got to decide what's most important. You've got to cut things you can cut, and that's what we'll be doing as a state. A couple of the priorities that I have that I'll mention briefly before taking your questions. You know, you'll see in there things you heard from me during the campaign. That won't be a shock. You know, a big part of the campaign was investing $100 million into a grant program to hire more law enforcement officers. Washington State, as you probably heard me say many times, ranks last per capita in number of law enforcement officers we have as a state. Unacceptable. I'm pleased Senator Holy is going to be offering legislation, or maybe already has put together legislation. We've communicated about that. He's looking forward to working with me, and I'm looking forward to working with him on that legislation that's going to be bipartisan and trying to move that forward. So again, a key is showing we can make some savings. And by the way, this is just a first cut from my perspective. That 6% across the board, you're going to save about $4 billion, okay? But that's a first step for me. But these investments are going to be important. Affordability is another key aspect. I'm looking forward to hearing from Lieutenant Governor Heck. He's been leading on the transition team, the committee on affordable housing. He has a very detailed report that I'm about to get that'll have a series of recommendations, so more to come on that. Another investment we're making is on childcare, a huge issue for people across the state. We're proposing $100 million that goes to increase investments, increasing eligibility for people who can access assistance with childcare. We propose that for folks who work in small businesses. So if you've got, for example, your family of four, your income is about $100,000. We're increasing up to $100,000 of those who can access eligibility for childcare. I think currently it's around $79,000 or $80,000. There's a whole metric that's involved, but that's an investment as well. So from my perspective, coming as governor, investments in public safety, investments in affordability, those will be key. But look, I went through on the King County Council, smaller budget, but still not insignificant, a budget challenge. And we worked in a bipartisan way to go through that budget line by line and to find those savings and adopt a balanced budget that still serve the people. And some of those cuts will be difficult for sure, but I'm a believer that our government can be far more efficient and focused on the people, and that's going to be a key priority for me moving forward. All right, I'm going to stop there because I know we don't have a ton of time. I'm on a lot of hands. I'm just going to start moving around. So let's go here, here, and there, just to start right here. Yeah.
Governor-elect Ferguson, I was curious about your cabinet.
Yeah.
The legislature will, of course, make the final call here, but during the course of the campaign, there were suggestions about a housing secretary, or excuse me, just a member of some kind in your cabinet devoted to housing. A ferries chief,
Yes.
perhaps pulled from Washington State Department of Transportation, as well as
Mental health SAR maybe might have been the other.
health
Yep.
SAR, and we haven't even, I think there, and OSPI potentially as well.
Yeah.
What are you in favor of in terms of in the overall cabinet level inflation, I suppose you could call it?
Well, I guess I don't consider inflation. What I consider is folks I'm hearing from directly on the most pressing issues facing the people of the state of Washington. So I'm hearing directly from them, and they're hearing directly from me. So yesterday, we had a day devoted to our ferry service as one example. I think you mentioned that, right? And one change to the cabinet is having the head of ferries be on the cabinet. We have a system in crisis, as you all know. But I'm a believer that I think what's worked well for me as Attorney General, let me put it this way, is I have a small group that meets me literally every single day. And I make sure that the most important cases we have or the most important policies we're engaged in, that's someone on that team is in charge, they're reporting directly to me on it. That keeps my priorities in line, and I'm getting feedback in real time about what's going on. So ferries is a good example of that, right? Housing is a good example of that. And mental health is a good example of that. I consider those amongst the core issues that we're facing. And so look, I just don't want to have the head of ferries. I don't want Steve down in some reporting to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to me. Forget it. You know what I mean? It's not the way I operate. If you got a crisis, act like you got a crisis, and it communicates to the people, right? When I was at this meeting yesterday with folks in the community, I think they appreciated hearing, hey, this person's going to be on my cabinet. The concerns you're expressing, guess what? This individual will be reporting to me at cabinet meetings on a regular basis. And so for me, it's about accountability. And that's going to be important, and that's why we're doing it that way. Thanks.
The ferries chief being in your cabinet.
I have not changed my one thing I can assure you, if I said something during the campaign, I plan on delivering on it. That's just, so if that was a part of we were pretty detailed, we put on our website where we want to go, what we want to do, and so, yes, that is going to happen. I think we're hoping to have our first cabinet meeting on a week from today. I think we're trying to pull that off, and, head of ferries will be there, yes. I should have started with the Washingtonian of the day, but yeah, go for it, yeah.
Let's forget Washingtonian of the day. I'm embarrassed. Two questions. One on your $100 million to hire more police officers. Are you, is that for a biennium, 1 year? Is that going to be a steady year by year thing? Essentially, I'm bringing up the questions that Tim Hornsby brought up about an hour ago.
Yes, those will all be, in fact, we're getting a report from the transition team, but my goal is $100 million over a biennium to invest in law enforcement. So that is our objective. That's what I talked about during the course of the campaign. I understand sometimes you see the budget documents, it's on a 4-year budget, you get the idea, but our investment that we're proposing is for the biennium.
Okay, and wanted to see if I heard you correctly, because it zipped by me and I don't know whether I heard it correctly or not. Have you identified $4 billion in cuts? What are they?
That's the across the board 6% agency cuts, right?
Yeah.
That generates tremendous savings if you do that. In addition, there's some specific items in there that you'll see that are much smaller, but as one example, one thing we'll be doing is looking at different agencies, right, and parts of state government to see if there are funds that can be swept, that can be better utilized for other purposes, right? So for example, I'm leading with my own office, the AG's office. I'm sweeping $35 million from a fund that I helped create that does our work on affirmative litigation. We're sweeping $35 million from that, putting into making these investments. The AG's office will be fine. I've talked to Nick Brown about it, right? They're going to be fine, right? Want to be clear. But hey, I'm sure Nick's not excited about it, but they can still function their core mission, right? They still have the resources to do that, but that'll be something we're looking at across agencies. That's an example in the document I put out today.
So this is just sort of everyone trims a little bit as opposed to we're going to get rid of that program or get rid of the Commerce Department or something. It's essentially everyone just trims a little bit here and there then?
So great question. So maybe I should elaborate a little bit. So What you'll see that's being announced now is I'm asking every state agency to propose their budget cuts. So there will be an equivalent of 6% across all state agencies. One agency might be 8%, one might be 4%, you get the idea, but it's going to be 6%. Because I understand, hey, some agencies might have a tougher time getting there, or I'm just not willing to make the cuts because of what that agency does, the service they provide to the people, right? Other agencies might have to take more. So that'll be a core part of it. Within that, of course, right, there will be decisions made that agencies are recommending and decisions I have to make about where those cuts are. Is it a program specifically, right? Is it something else? But as an example, there have been some recent new investments as a state. Those are important. Like, I'm not minimizing how important they are, but if there's a service that the people haven't yet felt yet, or is relatively new, maybe that's one that we need to look at. Can that be postponed, for example, until times are better economically, right? As opposed to one that, hey, folks have been depending on and has been proven to work effectively. So it's not, that's not going to be easy work, to your point. But from my standpoint, what I'm trying to communicate is there are no sacred cows. There's a reason why I picked the AG's office for a $35 million fund sweep, okay? In addition, their 6% cut. I want to communicate to all agencies, if I'm willing to do that to an agency I care a great deal about, okay? You too have to take part in this. So that's part of what we're communicating.
Does that
We can
include
get
the
both you guys, yeah.
CCA money? Does that include the CCA money, no sacred cows?
Well, CCA money is coming in, right? You see what I'm saying? That's money that we have that can be invested. There's not.
Reallocating that money?
Oh, well, there'll be, look, and one conversation I'm having is with Climate Commitment Act funds is, hey, this again, go back to conversation yesterday on ferry service. We need more boats in the water sooner, as an example, right? So I want to look at what we can do. I've asked budget staff to give me options of how we can do that, okay? Hey, one option is looking at Climate Commitment Act funds, right? Can we use more of those funds to get more boats in the water sooner, as an example? So I think what you will see is anytime you're going through and, a challenge like this on the budget side, I'll just share my perspective. A, you've got to keep an open mind. There are no sacred cows around the budget, other than we've identified K through 12 education. We're not touching that. Public safety, right? So maybe that's not the right way to put it, but you see where I'm going. Outside of some core priorities, from my standpoint, one has to be open about it. And, on my days on the King County Council, I was the only Democrat that supported reducing the size of the King County Council from 13 county council members to 9, okay? Right, an idea that Tim Eyman supported. The reason we have 9 King County Council members today is because I was willing to take that vote, and the only Democrat to take that vote, to make that happen, to which I got a lot of criticism from people in my party, to put it very, very mildly. And it cost me my job on the King County Council. My 4-year term was shortened to 2 years because of that. My district was eliminated, and I had to run against another Democratic incumbent in her district, and my house is in the very corner where the new district was. If I'm willing to cut my own job, okay, if I'm willing to cut my agency that I love dearly, okay, with the fund sweep, I'm trying to communicate, okay, to the people of the state of Washington and to state agencies that this is how we need to operate when you're facing a $12, $14 billion shortfall. Yeah.
So I have a question, but first to clarify what you just announced.
Yep.
Is this an executive order, and when does it go in place? When do these agencies have to identify the fund?
I don't know if have we set a deadline to it, Mike? Do you know if there's a deadline? It'll be soon. I don't know if there's a deadline in it or not, but it'll be, look, that we'll be communicating very clearly that in order to make this work, right, the legislature needs to be, let me say it this way. For some of the cuts, it'll require legislative action, for example, right? There are things in statute that will require a change in statute to effectuate it, as an example. So yes, it'll be communicated very clearly. We need these proposals very soon, so we have time to go through them. My team needs to go through them, I need to go through them, and then make decisions about which ones we're moving forward on.
Okay, so my original question is, we heard from the House Speaker and from Senator Peterson that they believe they need to raise taxes in order to fill this hole.
Yeah.
Do you believe that this budget shortfall, as it has been described, that it can be filled without raising taxes?
We're gonna find out, right? So I start the job in a week. So I'm not there yet. Let's start with that. But again, trying to communicate before even taking the job, how I'm going to try and tackle this challenge. And so the focus of the transition team, we've got 13 subcommittees. There's no subcommittee on revenue. That does not exist. My directions were very clear to that fantastic transition team. Don't look at it. It's not a conversation for me. What we are going to look at is how we can be more efficient, more lean, and decide what we want to prioritize for the investments we're going to make. So that's been my focus. That's been my sole focus. I had a long a meeting with the budget OFM folks just a couple nights ago. We're talking revenues, right? The whole conversation was, hey, how can we be leaner? How can we do this? What's the right percent across the board for agencies? How can we maybe use CCA funds to get another ferry, right, in the water sooner? That's where my conversations are right now. That's my focus. Let's do it. I've got a lot of hands. I'll go as fast as I can. Go ahead.
You're our first new governor in more than a decade. I wanted
That's
to
true.
ask if you could describe a little bit about how you expect to work with the legislature
Yeah.
and how that might differ from the way you saw the Inslee administration work with lawmakers. What sort of things are you thinking about strategy-wise or just communication-wise with the people who are going to have to sign off on the things you want?
Sure. I'll try and give a relatively short answer to an important question, just in the interest of time. But, I think what I plan to do in terms of my relationship with the legislature is continue the way we've been doing as Attorney General. So, as you know, as Attorney General, I have a legislative agenda every year, right? We propose anywhere from 6 to a dozen bills, right, that we propose, agency request, work with the legislature on those. I'm proud that in my 12 years as Attorney General, we had, 50 bills that were signed into law, all but maybe 2 of them bipartisan, by the way. Many of those, the prime sponsor was a Republican. I found that on the issues that I was focused on with those policies, they tend not to be partisan issues, right? Changes to our gun laws, right, ban the self-assault weapons, those were one of the 2 votes that were partisan. But for the most part, we're able to work across the aisle with Republicans and Democrats on those proposals. So that's not going to change. The team that works with them is, Mike Webb, who's here, my current chief of staff, he's still going to be doing that operation, right? Joyce Bruce, my legislative affairs director currently, she's coming over doing that work as well. So they will have familiar faces that they've known for a long, long time. And I think what I would say is, beyond that is, the job is different, to your point. So as AG, obviously I'm pretty focused on the legal side, but now my work as governor is even more directly involved with the legislature. So I think what they would see from me is someone I'm very interested in their work. I can get pretty interested in the details on things from time to time. I hope to be an active presence around here and work with the legislature to try and solve problems and to work in a bipartisan fashion, where we can. And I look forward to that. Yes.
Part of your proposal that was just released today also includes a 3% cut to 4-year higher education institutions.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, like how you came to those numbers and also what effect those cuts might have on those educational institutions?
Well, there's going to be a lot of conversations, right, with our higher ed colleagues going forward. I was mindful that, hey, how important I've heard from folks traveling around the state to our education system is. And so we're trying to choose numbers that we think are achievable and realistic. But obviously, right, we're at the front end of that conversation, right? There's going to be a lot of conversations and discussions about what that looks like, what those are. And but we felt that was a number that was doable and achievable. But obviously, this is something that is we're at the front end on. But at the end of the day, and I've already had a lot of conversations with folks who I respect and work with closely, who, just going to be honest, I'm not sure they fully appreciate the scope of the budget challenge we have, just being honest with you, okay? And part of my job is communicating that very, very clearly, what we're facing. And we are not going to tax our way out of this thing. Not going to happen, right? The people expect us to get serious about that. And look, I know my agency, the AG's office, can take that 6% cut. It will not be easy, but we can do that in a way that still serves the people and serves our state clients. And other agencies can as well, and we just all have to lean into that. Thanks. I guess we got time for, someone's going to cut me off soon, but a couple more, yes.
Are there any tax proposals that you've ruled out? I'm sorry. Are there any tax proposals that you've ruled out? And could you support either the wealth tax or the jumpstart style tax?
Yeah, so again, I'm just not focused on that. I did place in the document that you're going to see here that's literally, I think, being released now, I do have a quote in there, right, a comment on the wealth tax. And the reason I put a comment on that is because it is obviously central to the proposed budget, right? So I just felt that was important to say something about that. And you'll have to find the exact words, but I think I express deep skepticism of the wealth tax. And so I'd refer you to that. But I haven't, beyond that, haven't been weighing in on any other revenue proposal. Look, in the past, as AG, it's not my job to weigh in on revenue proposal in the legislature, but I did publicly support the capital gains tax, for example, right? That's not something I needed to do as Attorney General, but I felt that made sense to me, okay? That was a revenue proposal that made sense to me for a lot of reasons I won't bore you with now, and the people obviously agree with that. But moving forward, and where we are right now, I want to comment on the wealth tax because that is central to that budget. But I'm just not engaging in those conversations right now. I mean, we're just focused on a big part of the work that we have. And again, I'm just going to underscore this. It's no different than if you're a family and a breadwinner loses a job or gets a pay cut, and you've got to make choices with your budget. That's just the way real world works. That's the way the real world works. And I'm just really determined to make sure I'm articulating every opportunity with leaders, with legislators, with the public, how serious this shortfall is. And by the way, moving forward, I'll have more to say on this next week when I become governor, but, and maybe I'll conclude with this, I think I'm out of time, but I do want to at least mention this, is that we will need to understand how we got to this shortfall, okay? Right now, my bandwidth is a little limited. We got a lot on my plate right now with the transition and leaving the AG's office and getting ready for taking office. There's a lot going on. But I intend to spend some time making sure I understand how we got to this level of a shortfall. And to make sure that I, as governor, do everything I can to ensure this doesn't happen again. Sometimes there's things that go on in the economy that are beyond your control. But I believe we need to take a hard look at how we got here. I think that includes taking a close look at, what sort of growth projections we're relying on as we put a budget together. How realistic are those when that budget's being put together? Are we being realistic? And listening to experts on what they project for revenue growth as a state for the next 2 or 4 years. All those things are things that I'm paying a lot of attention to right now and giving a lot of thought to, and will no doubt have more to say next Wednesday at my State of the State. Hey, thanks so much, everybody. It's great to see you all. Hope you have a great day. Thanks. Hey, thanks, Roland. Appreciate it. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I'm going to follow my team. Yep.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, you can stand up now. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next year, and we'll see you during the session.